Hi, everybody. This is Amina from Bridging Worlds. And as you can see behind me, I am a pet psychic trainer, educator, and public speaker. I wanted to record this video because I was looking around at some news clips and some other videos and came across a really terrific, actually uplifting video of a gentleman feeding raccoons. And he had 20 or 30. This isn't some raccoons. So he's been doing it for some time. It looks like he lives in a rural place and looks like he's been doing it, as I said, for a while. He brought out quite a meal for them, and it was carrots, and they were whole carrots, and hot dogs, and I think there were grapes in the snacks. And you can tell these wild raccoons are used to, have been habituated to him coming out every night. I don't remember if he does it twice a day or once a day, but he does do it every night. Good heart, good heart. I don't want to lead anybody astray that's where I'm going with this. What I want to educate everybody by, because it moved me so much, because he has the right intention, but he is going to cause repercussions he's not either seeing, or a lot of people who watch his YouTube video, and I'm sure there's tons of them out there. I just happened to see this one. So I want to talk to you from a wildlife rescue point of view. I have worked with wildlife since I was a very small child, and I have studied it in college, and then went and last thing I did was work in a wildlife center. And these animals came to us for many, many reasons. We had a bear actually right before I left, a year or two before I left. He was brought in from Big Bear, California, and he had been fed by people. We had Hollywood animals that didn't want to be Hollywood animals. And so, what do you do with a lion? What do you do with a lioness? You give them to a sanctuary because they don't make their money. So, getting a little off topic, I'm just telling you where I was at and the types of animals we had. We had ferrets that in California it was illegal to have, and there were two or three of them that were found after the landowner went into their garage and the tenants had moved out. And here was a pen of three ferrets. And so they came to a wildlife sanctuary because they weren't currently legal. I don't believe they still are, but I'd have to look that up. And just a myriad of types of things like this. Hedgehogs, they are very difficult pets as far as you have to have the right temperature, you got to got the right environment. They can literally look like they're sleeping, and so many owners end up finding out that they've passed away to a myriad of things. They've got mites, they've got whatever. Wildlife does not make good pets. You have to be very specifically trained in their diet, exercise, and needs. Birds of prey, a big deal. As snakes, all of this type of thing. I absolutely love them. I've worked with them for years, owned a few. None of the ones I have mentioned. Could you imagine me walking down California Boulevard with a lion next to me? I think I might clear the sidewalk. So let me get back on track. I want us all to cohabitate. That would be amazing. They'd be amazing. We all respect each other's space, and that means humanity to humanity. But right now, I'm just talking humanity to wildlife. What I have a problem with is this video got a ton of likes, and I love that for the love and the affection. What I don't want to see happening, which I can pretty much guarantee it is, having the education in the background that I do, and I have seen it in action, and people fall in love with those animals and they love them back and whatever else qualification. What is happening though is, let me tell you a story that is a true story. And it mimics this situation very, very, very succinctly and hopefully with enough detail so you really get the heart of what I'm trying to say. So there was a woman in a place that had bears, and she had a wood deck, and same, this gentleman had a wood patio that with the raccoons. So again, very similar. So she lived there for 15 or 20 years. The economy tanked and she lost the house. And so she ended up having to move out. She was evicted by the bank. What happened is, of course, somebody else bought the property, moved in, and the bear came back. And if you imagine a full grown bear, nobody told me if it was a boy or a girl, because that would depend on how many hundreds of pounds it was. But they couldn't figure out why the bear kept coming up to the patio, kept coming up to the front door. They were terrified. I've seen the claws up close and personal. I've seen the teeth up close and personal. Just imagine how that looks. So what happened is this woman was feeding this bear. And so the bear acquainted people with food. And all she was doing was it was really simple. She'd buy a 50-pound bag of dog food and dump it all over her porch. And he'd come, or he or she would come and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat. I leaned towards a male because if it was female, she would have brought her cubs back. And then when she passed away, her cubs would bring their family, and on this would go. We didn't get enough time, nor did I get enough history on that. But what did happen is the new owners moved back in. They got all their furniture in. They're all happy, and it's a beautiful forest that they're in. Bear comes back, and the bear was shot, killed, because one person fed them. There's a saying in the industry, and in a lot of places you might have heard it: a fed bear is a dead bear. People are afraid. If you went out and, I don't know, let me hypothetically, you decided to feed the sharks, there, as far as I know, there's tour boats that still go out and you can feed the sharks and nothing happens. They get fed. So how do you think a fisherman catches almost anything? Maybe not a whale, but they put fish on a hook and they get fed. Now, we're not talking about commercial fishermen. Obviously, those are nets. But you're teaching an animal that you mean food, that you are part of they can rely on you for food, especially if you're doing it every night. And this gentleman with the raccoons was talking about he did it every night, sometimes in the daytime too. So these raccoons, and there was a lot of babies. I'm talking about a lot of babies. There were 20 or 30 raccoons at minimum on his porch, and half of those were babies. So not one raccoon gave birth to those. So we're talking generation after generation after generation. Their dog was, of course, locked inside the house. It was very fascinating, interesting, and it was a lovely scene of having all those raccoons climbing all over him and that type of stuff. Let's go with what happens when they get angry because he ran out of food and he gets bit by just one raccoon, and he gets rabies and he dies, and then his family gets upset, or they just sell his house because he seemed to live alone. And we've got the scenario of the bear all over again. So for me, I'm watching a very sweet scene with a man who truly loved these raccoon, but he was loving them in a way that's going to get them killed. Because when somebody else moves in next door, even if you're in a forest somewhere, you might get a neighbor, in the land, who knows, there's being developed all the time. Or he passes away and his grandson or his brother or whoever buys the house or gets the house, and they don't want 30 to 60 raccoons running up every night, ripping their screens, climbing on their windows, saying, "Oh, where are you going to feed me? Going to feed me?" If you've ever met a raccoon, I challenge you to do that. They're very tenacious. They're going to keep coming back. They're going to keep coming back. The bears will come back. The birds will come back. Butterflies will kind of ignore you, but that's the insect world. Totally different conversation. Know what your results of your love could get killed. If you truly have compassion for them, then take yourself out of the equation. What does that look like? Don't feed wildlife. If you're going to help during a crisis, there was a fire, there was a flood, there was packs of snow where the ground didn't recover for 9 months, or there's these things happen. And if you're supporting wildlife through a naturally found source, you plant berry bushes, you you're not, again, I don't want to say you're going to go out and buy a deer that has been slaughtered, because you are becoming a food source. It's great to supplement. Hopefully your bird feeders are small and you are keeping them kind of full or not, so you don't become the only food source, because honeybees are so vital, but we are not feeding them enough because we're not planting enough, but we're also killing them with pesticides. So that's a whole different conversation. I'll do a video on labor later. What I really want to get through to everybody is, please, please think about the chain reaction of your decision to love an animal to death. And that's what happens with wild animals that are fed by humans. And that can be anything: skunk, deer, owl, bear. There's so many to choose from. There's so many to choose from. When they lose their fear of us, at some point, somebody will be afraid of them enough that the powers that be it Fish and Wildlife or a game warden or whatever is in your country, state, place you are, they will come out and say, okay, this bear has become a nuisance. So they'll either outright shoot it because there's nowhere to take it, and their life is over. They have nothing. Or like a bear that was brought to one of the sanctuaries I worked in, will be in a cage for the rest of her life because people were feeding her. She would go up to the cabins and she would beg. They'd throw out an apple thinking they were chasing her away, but no, they were giving her a reason to come back. So please, please, please think about not just how neat it is to see the birds outside your door and other things. And there's plenty of times when they really need that bowl of water. And water is not something that really drives everybody crazy, but it's so essential to all of us. So do provide water. I'm not saying don't feed the birds. Feed them exactly what they need for the birds you have in your yard, but keep it limited because the squirrels are going to get it. So get a squirrel-free bird feeder. And the hummingbirds, oh, here we go. The hummingbirds don't need Kool-Aid. And I'm using the brand name. I don't mean any offense to Kool-Aid, but they don't need sugar water. They need sweet water. But the type of nectar that comes from a flower and a plant is natural. It makes your yard look stunning and it helps the hummingbirds. So please plant a bush, a tree, a plant. And some nurseries will carry native plants, but what I really, really recommend is that you go to a natural nursery that is for your area, for your town, and for your climate. You need to know where you live, climate-wise, and zone-wise is what it's called. They have numbers, and they have people who specialize in knowing these things. If you cannot find it at your local hardware nursery, go to a nursery that you can. Go to the universities have a lot of resources, and say, I need to talk to somebody who knows, what am I in? And then after that, you go to Google, as my kids would say, and you just Google it and say, what zone am I in? And then you know what type of plants to buy. What are native, they make, let me give you an example. I was lucky enough to put in a monarch butterfly field in one place that I was, and I had to have the right plant. So it's milkweed, but you come to find out when I started doing my research, there's more than one milkweed, and it needs to be specific to the area and to where you are planting it. And then they've got to be supported by, you get, I didn't buy any butterflies, I didn't buy any worms, I didn't do any of that. I said, okay, I put it in the soil, we weeded, watered, nurtured it. And one morning I'm looking through the plants all the time going, doggone it, this is so silly of me. Doggone it, why is so what he eating the leaves? Because I'm thinking that it's a different, invasive worm. And then I looked over in the bottom and went, oh, it's black and white and yellow. It was a monarch. It was in its worm stage, and it went through chrysalis and process, and we got butterflies. The monarch butterfly is the most prolific butterfly in the entire United States. And it goes to Mexico, it comes up California, goes to the top, goes back. I mean, these poor little ladies and gentlemen are tired. We need to plant something for them so they have good food, and that we can continue on. Every single bug, bee, ant, lizard, snake, all are so important. But if we destroy the world and we destroy their food source, then we lose out, because I don't want a world where there's no bears and no raccoons and no snakes and no butterflies, etc. So please do your research. Get away from the hummingbird feeder of sugar and water, especially if it's red and it's not natural, and get nectar. Please plant some flowers for the hummingbirds, plant some for the honey bees. And I'll do one on just honeybees someday, because that's a really big deal to me. Everything you eat, I'm going to leave this last thought with you, because I don't want you to feed the bears, don't want you to feed the wolves, because you'll get them shot if you don't do it the right way. Check with Fish and Wildlife or whoever's in your area. But last but not least, if you like to eat anything, it all backs up to a honeybee. And it's the girls. Boys are back at the hive building and making sure the queen is protected. And that's actually girls too, but the guys are worker bees. The girls are the ones who are out foraging, bringing the pollen back and doing all that. Everything you want to eat can be brought back to a honeybee. So don't be afraid, be calm, wish her well, and wish her back. They go out 5 miles, and that's how far they can get from the hive and back. And I promise, again, this is my passion conversation of, if you want to be around a honeybee, at the most safest time is when they're in a swarm. And that goes against so many things everybody knows. Oh my gosh, I'm terrified, I'm terrified, I'm terrified. If you see a swarm hanging out on the side of a building, they're resting. They're taking what was the current queen, they're protecting her. So they're surrounded all around her. And then they go to a building, a sign somewhere, just to take a deep breath. And they can fly out 5 miles at least. And they have already picked a new home for her to set up her next hive, because she's given birth to a new queen that was left in the original hive. Don't fear a swarm. And if you do, that's okay. Call a beekeeper, because he will or she will be thrilled to come out and give them a pre-made home. But please, please, love our insects, love our bears, love our raccoons, just not to death. Thanks, everybody.